He wants to get out because of good behavior. He made the decision to dilute medication. He made that decision out of greed instead of thinking about people's lives.
Yeah. How would you describe Courtney?
Evil. An evil monster.
Yeah. Do you think he was ever appropriately charged?
I do not feel like he was appropriately charged because my grandma suffered a long, what's the word I'm looking for?
Bone cancer, I know, is very painful.
She suffered a very long and painful death. And there at the end, the amount of drugs they were giving her to make her comfortable was unreal because she was dying of cancer from the inside out.
What do you think he should have been charged with?
He should have been charged with murder for all of the victims that received his medication and eventually passed. He should have been charged with assault on the other victims who received it and are still alive because he assaulted them on the inner workings of themselves.
Yeah. Are you surprised that a pharmacist could do something like this?
I am surprised because they take a medical oath and they have ethics, and he put all of that aside. He put all of his schooling and all of his training aside for greed.
Yeah. When you tell people about your grandmother and you tell people this is how she died, how do you explain how she died? Do you say, oh, my grandmother died of cancer, or do you have another explanation?
I say that my grandma died because of Robert Courtney's heinous crime.
There's some crimes that are so wrong and so heinous, whether they're violent or not, that a person should never get out, and this is one of them. But the beauty of our system is that there are crimes like that. It's a crime of murder. It's a crime of felony murder. And if someone dies during the commission of a felony, they can spend the rest of their life in prison. And there's no statute of limitations on this, so he can be charged. And I get it. It's putting a tremendous amount of pressure on the judicial system and a prosecutor's office to say charge him, because they might not be able to convict him. Well, let a jury decide that. Let a jury decide that. And because I can't imagine any jury who, looking at this situation like this, who's going to do anything other than realize what he did was he committed murder. He committed a felony. He submitted fraudulent billing records and people died. And let him spend the remaining years of his life fighting those charges off. That's what I hope happens. I hope the minute he's let out of the federal system, he's met with a set of handcuffs, and he's welcomed to the state of Missouri, into the state of Missouri system. It's so unfathomable. When I first heard about it, and I didn't believe it could be possibly true. But I sat in a prison cell with him and took his deposition in Leavenworth, Kansas, and it's the face of evil. And it's, just think of a serial killer. Think of Ted Bundy roaming the streets free after he's killed somebody you loved because he got out on some early release program. I mean, it's easy for us in violent crimes to think somebody like that's never going to walk free. But what more of a heinous criminal act can you have than depriving somebody of the medicine that they need to stay alive? It's like slowly strangling a person to death.
It was gut-wrenching work, but I'm glad we stopped him, and I do believe that it was a real public safety issue. That was one of the more important things that we took from the plea agreement. I know that a lot of people in Kansas City really didn't like that there was a plea agreement, and I totally understand. A lot of people wanted us to charge him with murder, which I wish we could have found a way. And I know the attorneys that worked the case brought in many, many experts. We evaluated that, and it would have been nearly impossible to meet the burden of proof of beyond a reasonable doubt for each and every patient. We would have loved to have charged him with murder and sent him away forever. But we had to temper that with trying to get more information. We certainly didn't want him to go through a trial and walk out the door and keep his pharmacist license and you don't know what he's going to do. Because I do believe no matter what profession he would have chosen, he would have been a very bad individual and committed some sort of crime other than the crime that he did commit.
Do you consider him a violent offender?
Absolutely, but not in the traditional sense. You know, a lot of people think of a violent killer as someone who goes on a rampage with the gun and starts beating people and shooting people up. Well, that person may only kill 1, 2, 3 people, you know, in whatever rage or whatever's going on with them. His is a different type of violence. He took his role as a pharmacist and did things intentionally. It wasn't by accident. And he had the knowledge to know what he was doing, which shortens people's life, cause them to die early. It's a different type of violent, but it's still violent because it's still taking away these people's life. And I go on to say, I mean, he's caused the death of hundreds and hundreds of people. And I think that if anybody who's in a decision-making role read the full case on what he did, what he said, any interviews, they would also agree that he is a violent killer. You might even call him a mass murderer. And I don't believe that he fits the category of someone for early release because it's a non-violent crime.